So, World Economic Forum issues phase out car ownership. People can walk or share. So, it's not so much that they want cars to go away, they just want your cars to go away. Some people don't know this, but quite a few of the WEF members own interests in rideshare programs, ride sharing apps. These are basically cars that are usually placed in urban cities, and they're used throughout the day by different people. You have an app. You basically tap the app on some sensor in the car, probably some kind of Bluetooth sensor or something. It bills your credit card. You hop in, you drive, the insurance, the plate, the registration, everything's covered. You don't have to worry about anything. You just drive to your next, destination, and you throw the car in their lot and you get out and you're done with it. You don't have to deal with repairs, maintenance, tire changes, oil changes, none of that stuff. So there's a lot of guys out there that own interest in these rideshare sort of apps and not rideshare in the sense of like Uber, but like car sharing apps. Um, I think it was 2009 or 10. I was at this mastermind event, and one of the themes that was going around, like one of the common sound bites that you start to hear a lot around that time, is in the future, you will have access to everything, but own nothing. And it sounded like an interesting pitch. It sounded like something that, the techno guys, the putting the butter in the coffee guys at the time, the all those woosah sort of guys really, like they really, subscribe to the idea of what do we need a car for? I can just tap my app because I like my phone and my Ubers and all these sort of things. And rather than calling for a car, I can just walk up to a lot and get into this car and drive away in it and not have to worry about insurance, parking fees, nothing. You just drive it and you let it go. And that's fine for some people in the city, but cars are personal for a lot of people, men especially. Women, it's kind of like a fashion object. It's like an accessory, it's got swoopy lines and it looks pretty. Like with women, when they see cars, they like for example, if they like higher end German cars, they don't care if it has a M5 competition badge on the back bumper. They just want the BMW roundel on the hood and on the back bumper and in the center of the steering wheel. So when they take a picture of their wrist or their watch or their diamond ring or something like that, it shows up, the little roundel. They don't really care if it's an M car. They just want the experience of being in a premium, German automobile sort of thing. So a base model 3 Series would do, essentially. But men, on the other hand, they tend to have a more intimate, deeper connection with cars. The men that I roll with, anyway, we certainly do, because we do a lot of miles on the highways when it comes to rallies and even the back roads and stuff like that. But men in general tend to have a connection with vehicles. They like it. It's an extension of who you are. You would see guys, and you probably get them like even in their more, season years, that probably spent more time cleaning and detailing and washing and waxing and maintaining their cars than what they do their homes. There's guys, and I made this point the other day. I was on with Vigorous Steve. He's kind of a bio bro dude, and we were talking about blood labs. And there's guys that will take oil out of their engine when they do an oil change. They put it in this container. It's called Blackstone Labs, the name of the company, and you ship it in, and they analyze your engine oil to see how much copper is in it, because that gives you some kind of indication if the piston rings are wearing sooner, so what kind of life you're going to get out of the engine. So they go through all these markers and they'll compare it up against other cars, and they'll tell you, like all this data. But these are the same guys that don't really care to run their blood labs. Like, this is how much they love cars. Like, they'll run the labs on the engine oil, but they won't run labs on their own blood when it comes to self-care. But again, the show's about the crazy sort of, plans for your vehicle. So we got Klaus Schwab here sitting in some, I don't know, beige sort of color Econo box. That's the other thing too. They want to take personality away from cars. They don't want them to reflect the owner's image as they have in the past. It's just like, we'll just put some beige over here and some darker beige over here, and maybe we'll have laminate bamboo, and we'll call it, the best Econo box in the world. So this is how, things are going. And they're having, conversations about sky high fuel prices. That's one of the other slides that I got up that's going to pop up too. The communal sharing of cars, circular approaches. Sounds like fun. The global elites in Geneva, Switzerland are now instructing their young global leaders embedded into governments. This is what they've done. And I'm going to show you a recording in a short moment here. Average car or van in England is just driven 4% of the time. So why do we need all these vehicles? Why don't we share them? That's an interesting argument. Sure. 4% of the time of the day. Yeah, because you're probably driving, an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. But the truth of the matter is a lot of the cars are being used around the same time, especially for those that are commuting or they're using them for work related. This is a picture of Davos with everybody's private jet. This is fine. This is completely okay. Don't worry about the environment when it comes to flying our private jets, even if it's only 22 miles from one short haul airport to another, so I can hang out with my buddies and show them my private jet. All of these jets are absolutely okay. But your cars, they want to target. By the way, the total emissions, I was watching a video earlier this week. The total emissions of all the automobiles in Great Britain amount to 2% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world in total. These countries are not the problem, right? It's countries in Asia and in South America that are contributing. So, I mean, even if you took away all the cars or you put kill switches in all of them tomorrow and they couldn't drive them unless the government said so, that wouldn't really do anything. It wouldn't even put a dent in the problem. So it's kind of an absurd angle that they're hitting on this from. But I think where they're going is going to be climate lockdowns next. And we've heard a little bit of this from a few others in the last couple of years, and it seems to be gathering a little bit of momentum. Let me see if we got any sound bites on here that are worth mentioning. Not really. It's just blah, blah, blah. They came with their jets. Okay, so we'll close that down. We'll deal with the kill switches in a second. No thanks. So here's another article from the World Economic Forum wants to pump up gas prices even higher to save democracy. So one of their plans is to make fuel more expensive because they think that it's underpriced. It's kind of a funny notion because when is this? The Geneva, Switzerland one? Yeah, this is the recent one from Davos, right? So it's a bit of an article, and they're talking about what they're blathering on about, but you get the idea from the title. One of the arguments that they make is that petroleum-powered cars are damaging to the environment, and they try to argue that electric cars aren't so much. There was a dude that was on the Joe Rogan podcast recently in the last, I think 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book on basically how they mine metals from, I think it's a Congo, the Republic of Congo. It's somewhere in Africa. And the vast majority of the rare earth metals that they use in batteries that go in cars come from there. They're open pit mines. They're mostly kids working in there. They don't have safety equipment on because, if you're mining something like cobalt, it's toxic. It's basically going to kill you sooner. And they buy it at dirt cheap prices, right? So they're mining all of these metals for batteries in cars. And one of the arguments that is conveniently always made, like this is a bar graph here showing the amount of metals that go into an electric car versus a conventional car. When it comes to aside from the body work, like the steel body panels or the aluminum body panels, depending on how the car's made. But there's significantly more rare metals that are used in electric cars here. There's been a lot of studies done that show you that the impact of an electric car, it doesn't get to net zero. Like you basically have to drive it. I think it's something like 80,000 miles before it becomes a wash versus a gas-powered car. Gas-powered cars are less damaging to the environment immediately. And if you factor in that most electricity comes from coal-fired plants, like they're not coming from nuclear plants, they're not coming from wind or solar. Like wind or solar amounts to almost nothing. If wind and solar was so effective at producing electricity, you would see solar panels on the roofs and hoods and trunk lids of Teslas, but you don't because they're not efficient enough. They just don't do anything. I think there's a car company. It's Fisker, Henrik Fisker. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, but he was the dude that created the original Fisker, which is kind of a beautifully designed electric car. I think he worked with Aston Martin and a few other car companies, but he created this electric car. That went nowhere, kind of went bankrupt. Now he's got this new one coming out. And it's got a big solar panel on the entire roof of the car. It's like an SUV style car, so it's quite large, right? It's a people mover. And I think their pitch on the website is something like, oh, you'll get about 1,100 kilometers per year just off the solar panel and driving alone. Now, that's assuming daylight all the time, your car's parked outside, and all these other elements. But solar panels aren't that effective. Neither is wind at producing electricity. So it mostly comes from coal. They're shutting down nuclear plants because those are big, bad, and scary, even though they're extremely efficient at producing electricity for the size of them. And if they're run right, are very clean. They produce no harmful emissions whatsoever. They're shutting those down, though. We've got one here just on the east side of Toronto, and that one's shutting down. And we don't have really anything to replace it. So I'm not really sure what the government's plan is to sort of deal with that. But here's what they're saying in Canada now. The Liberal government, new gas car sales will be banned by 2035. That's 12 years away. They are planning to completely ban the sale of new gas cars. Now, that's not saying they're going to take away your existing cars. They haven't gone that far yet. Not to say they won't, but they're saying you won't be able to buy a brand new gas-powered car after 2035. That's the plan anyway. I don't know if they've passed the legislation, where it's at, but this is something coming from our good friend Justin Trudeau, who was made famous during the trucker convoys recently. He didn't like that they did scary things in his town, so he froze bank accounts, canceled insurance, and did all kinds of nefarious things. But he wants people to switch to electric vehicles, which, if we're being honest, I mean, if you live in a country like Canada, we don't have a proper infrastructure to get around in an electric car. We're not even close to it. Gas stations have been around for ages. They're obviously very efficient. You can refill and get your full range within 3 minutes, 2 minutes. I don't know how long it takes to fill up a car, a couple minutes. Whereas if you want to get maybe like 60 or 70% charge out of an electric car, you need a high capacity charger. It has to be available and nobody can be plugged into it. And you basically have to plug in and wait for, 45 minutes. Walk around, pick your nose, look at the sun, look at the grass grow. I don't know what they expect you to do. Maybe they want you to go shopping and spend money in the stores, but they're not particularly efficient at refilling your range and getting you the range you want. And the other, convenient problem with it is, I think you guys have probably heard of these things. They're called cell phones, right? And if you haven't noticed, with cell phones, they have these like electric batteries, lithium ion, cobalt batteries sort of in the device, but they never really seem to hold their charge after about a year or two, right? You always have to kind of keep them plugged in, or you have to have an external, battery bank to keep it charged up if you want to be able to use it throughout the day. That's a big selling pitch. Buy this phone. It's got enough battery power for a full day's use. Bullshit. Maybe for like the first month or two, and then the capacity starts to go down. And the same thing sort of happens with electric cars. When I go to the gas station and I fill up and I sit in the car, it says range 670 kilometers. It said 670 kilometers, whether that was 4 years ago when I got the car or today. The size of the gas tank doesn't change, but the size of but the amount of charge your battery bank can hold in an electric car deteriorates over time, and it deteriorates further in the wintertime when it's cold, or if you have to heavily use lights, air conditioning, heating, if you have to heat up the batteries, if that's part of the system that's integrated in, or if you have to cool the batteries, depending on if that's integrated in. But your experience will vary, as they say. But generally speaking, if you buy an electric car and you tend to get 670 kilometers in range, when you first get it, probably by year 2 or 3, you might have 560 kilometers in range, or 590, whatever it happens to deteriorate down to, because the batteries don't hold the same amount of charge. So it's the equivalent of you buying a car and then the gas tank shrinks over time. Okay, so you get less range. So that's another problem. I don't know how they're going to recharge all these cars in the next 12 years. If they don't have the infrastructure, if they don't have, the other problem too, I've got a couple friends with electric cars, and one of the complaints they're always making is, well, I went to this place, but the charger was down. Like I couldn't use it. It wouldn't take my card. It wouldn't connect. It wouldn't charge. Like I've never gone to the gas station to go put gas in my car and it doesn't pump. Ever. But people are having problems where they go to recharge their cars and they're like, it's not working, or it's out of service, or somebody's got a car plugged into it. Now you got to sit around and pick your nose and wait for the 45 minutes for them to take their charge. Then you move your car and then you wait another 45 minutes. You've just wasted an hour and a half, 2 hours standing around doing nothing, right? So they're not without problems. If you have a high capacity charger in your garage and you don't drive that far, you don't need to use like a charging network outside of something like the Tesla supercharger network, you're probably going to be fine, right? You use it to run around, get groceries, pick up the kids, drop them off. They're boring cars, nothing that interested in them. They look, I don't know what it is with electric cars. Like, why can't they make them look nice? I mean, I think the Tesla Model S is probably like a handsome looking car, like it's visually appealing, but I don't know what they've done with the Model 3, the Model Y. They just don't look good. They're not good looking cars. You don't visually look at them and go like, that's hot. I like that. I go in the garage and I look at my McLaren. I'm like, I'd hit that. Like, it's different with these electric cars, and they're subdued. They're more, that's just the way that they're building them. Right. Anyway, so our buddy Justin Trudeau is saying you won't be able to buy gas cars in about 12 years. He also happens to be one of the World Economics Forum's most favorite brainchild of, their group, right? He's like the bastard stepkid of Klaus Schwab, his best buddy sort of thing. I don't think Trudeau went to Davos this year. From what I understand, the deputy prime minister went, Christina Freeland, I think is her name. Anyway, but that's where we're at. I think the amount of cars we currently have on the road are something like 3% in Canada. So I'm really not sure how we're going to, shift over to this. It's just, it doesn't seem that practical. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pin down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.